All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, Darrin Brown. We have a veteran assistant director who is now first ADing, and for many years he was a second. I first met him as a second, and he had a long career before that. Now he's known for directing first assistant directing huge second units like Gemini Man and The Lost City, and TV shows like The Strain and What We Do in the Shadows, Man Seeking Woman, and a show that a lot of my students really love. But so much more. I could go on and on. Check out his IMDb. We're so thrilled to be able to talk to you about the role of the assistant director today, Darrin. So you started out as an actor, as a young actor at the age of 15. What led you towards the AD department?
I think I got to be, I was a kid actor. I was on Degrassi High and Degrassi Junior High. And I got a couple of other parts. And then that ended when I was 19, 20. Yeah, I would have been 20 when Degrassi ended. And I tried to live as an actor for about 3 years after that. And I'm short and kind of heavy set, stocky, as they say in the department stores. There's not a lot of work for short, stocky teenagers / young adults. And when I would have an audition, I'd walk in a room with 25 people who all looked exactly like me. And after a couple of years, I kind of just had this horrifying vision of myself at 40, still waiting tables and going to auditions. And I realized that I didn't love acting enough to make it my career. People who do that for a living really, really, really gotta love it. Because it is soul crushing. It is. And people say, oh, actors have it easy. They make all this money and it's all parties and cocaine and hookers and blowjobs and all that stuff. But it's not. It's a lot of lonely work at lone a home and waiting for the phone to ring and waiting tables and telemarketing to, pay your rent. And I didn't want that life. So I started by learning as much as I could. I went to Ryerson for radio and television, which I guess at the time was a good thing, but looking back, I now realize I didn't really need to go to film school to work in film. But at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. And also, after film school, I just went to work. And I did whatever work in film and television I could. So I was a PA. I was a PA on commercials. I was a PA on television shows. I was a PA on live sports, which was probably the best job I ever had, because I made some forward progress with that, and I became a floor director for Global on the Wednesday night hockey game, which was maybe the best job I ever had. And eventually it kind of led me to ADing. I'm still in category in 873 as a grip.
Oh, wow.
I'm on honorable withdrawal as a grip because I got my union card, because I did everything. I did everything except camera and hair, makeup, wardrobe. I think I touched almost every department. I did props, I did sets, I did a little bit of everything for a couple of years. And I think that helps me a lot in being an assistant director, not because I think I know how to do everyone's job, but I know just enough about almost everyone's job to understand the process, and that helps me in figuring out how long things take, and it helps me to inform my job.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. I don't hear a lot of ADs having done that, actually. I've heard of a lot of ADs having been actors though, but not.
Yes, a few of us. Well, look, assistant directing is a little bit like theater acting, a mix of theater acting and running a radio station, especially if the assistant director, in terms of the shooting floor, and we can go through the different stages, and we will.
Yeah.
In terms of the shooting floor, though, it's very much like running a radio station, and you're in charge of information, your news, weather, and sports every half hour on the half hour. So, and if you think about it that way, and that's what I tell young assistant directors, is you need to make sure the people you're working with know what's going on every half hour. And if you're not updating them every half hour, even if nothing's changing, sometimes nothing changing is as important to know as what is changing.
Oh God, yes.
If you're on a show where things are changing all the time and nothing is changing, that's as important to let people know as anything else.
Oh, incredible. So once you got your DGC card, did you start as a PA or a third? And then can you tell us about the trajectory of how it went?
So yeah, I did a little bit right out of university. I did a little bit. I was still trying to be an actor. Like I said, I worked on any place that would give me money to work near a film, television, commercial, mom and pop. I never did like corporate video or wedding videos, but everything shy of corporate video and wedding videos, I was there for. Like, I was just like, I need to do as much as I can to learn as much as I can. So I became a production assistant, and typically the trajectory is you're a PA and they throw you out on a street corner somewhere in the middle of the night in February and say, don't let anyone come through here. And then once people realize that you're a functional human being, because you'd be surprised how many people aren't and how many people don't get it. Like, it's amazing. It's not rocket science, but there are some people who don't get it. And the ones who do start to separate themselves from the pack very quickly. Especially now in the time of like a very watered down labor pool, because there's so many shows.
Yes.
So once somebody realizes that you can take direction, listen, and not completely embarrass yourself, they'll start to give you more responsibility to do anything, because the name of the game is delegate, delegate, delegate. Like, you can't, as an assistant director, do everything, and the person below me can't do everything, and the person below that person can't do everything. So it's about farming out those jobs to the people in your department who are reasonably competent. So once you prove yourself to be reasonably competent, people will give you shit to do. So from being just like a street corner lockup PA, they'll start teaching you about background and how to get them ready, what the paperwork is. So I sort of did a bunch of shows as the background PA. And then somebody says, hey, you're pretty good at organizing stuff back there. We need someone to cover at base camp. Can you help us at base camp? And base camp, being the base camp PA, you could call it fourth AD, which is, I think, insane. No more insane than the US moniker of second for something. But I'm just going to call it what the job function is, and everyone can argue about what the title is, because the title doesn't matter. All that matters is your paycheck and that everyone gets home safe. So so the base camp PA is where you first learn about time management. I mean, you've seen what's gone on. You've gotten the extras ready. You've been standing out on a street corner for a year or whatever. And then once they give you the cast, you start to learn paperwork flow. But the most important thing you learn as an assistant director at base camp is time management. You know that actor X needs to be in the hair chair at this time. And then when they get out of that hair chair, they need to go into makeup, because if you make them wait for a chair, there's going to be a problem. So ideally, the second AD has already figured that out, but invariably things go sideways back there. And so you learn about time management, you run the cast, and you learn some paperwork back there, and you learn responsibility. And then you come back to the floor as a third assistant director, which is what I did. I was a cast PA or fourth AD. There a lot of times they will hire seconds or thirds to run the trailers now, especially on movies with heavyweight cast. I always made the argument to producers that you're going to hand the largest amount of money, the film's greatest money resource, to the person who makes the least amount of money and has the least amount of training. Which to me always seemed insane.
That does sound.
So I now prefer, and when I worked, I preferred to hire third ADs, people with experience running the trailers, as opposed to, hey, you've seen a movie, right? Here's Angelina Jolie. Figure you play with you. So it was important to me to hire people with experience. And there's only one way to get experience, which is get experience. But and then I became a second AD, and you go back to the trailers and you figure stuff out for the next 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, a month. And then I became a first AD, which is the job of the first AD is really done in prep. Running a safe and efficient floor is important, But I will tell you, the more important job is in the prep. It's all won and lost in the prep. I prefer the shooting experience to prepping, but if anybody tells you that running the shooting floor is more important than prepping solidly, they're wrong.
I agree with you. It's exactly what I teach them about script supervision.
Unfortunately, no one ever says, "Hey, let's fix it in prep."
Right, right.
But it is. If you prep well, if prep is hard and difficult, but you get all your bases covered or most of your bases covered, your shoot will go well. If you're not putting in the time and the hours, and if prep is chill and everyone's just going for dinner, then you're probably headed towards a bit of a rocky road.
Can we talk about, I was going to ask you to delineate like what the second AD does compared to the first, but maybe it might be easier to do it like what happens in prep with the second and the first, however you want to do it. But I really want to get into the nitty.
So the second AD is primarily responsible for maintaining the schedule when shooting, and through prep, maintaining the prep calendar and making sure everybody gets where they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. The first AD in prep is responsible for everything. In conjunction with his or her second AD, in conjunction with his or her second AD, the first AD also helps to manage prep and figure out what meetings to have and where to go. But scouting, going with the key creative people to find the places to shoot, and then figuring out the information from the director, the DP, and the production designer to figure out in what order is best to shoot the project. And so in prep, you're having meetings, you're going to see places. And the second and the first AD do most of those things together. I would say as a second AD, I opt out on some meetings that I don't need to be a part of. Mm-hmm. But as the first AD, I'm in almost every meeting, with the exception of maybe creative meetings about tone and costume. Mm-hmm. If there's a specific point around tone, costume, hair, or makeup, I will ask the director to bring it up, or I will come to the meeting and bring it up and then leave as soon as possible. But something that's a very simple example of, where a first AD can save the movie is, a costume designer will, say, "Oh, she's wearing these awesome Milano Blahnik heels." And I'm like, okay, but she needs to run through a grassy, mud-filled thing. Is there a place where she could change her shoes in the movie? We don't have to see it. We just know that it happened so that we can justify it to ourselves. Or perhaps we need to track backwards to see where she could get into a pair of shoes that would work for, the muddy quarry. Because I have worked on shows where the actress had to run in heels through a muddy quarry, and I know of only one actress who can do it successfully. Her name is Piper Perabo.
Well, she also had an incident, so right?
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, she's literally the only actress I've seen who can flat out run.
Yes, it's true.
She can do it. So, but we learned that.
Yeah.
But just my job is to know and my job as the first AD in prep is to make sure we're having the conversations we're having, schedule the movie based on a million different factors, being location availability, the primary ones being location availability, cast availability, and ease of schedule, or a schedule that makes sense, worked around cast availability and location availability. And my second assistant director is responsible for making sure the trains run on time, and for running other things like stunt rehearsals and contacting everybody that needs to be contacted. The best way to put it is that the assistant director department is the hub and the information hub and logistical center of the movie. Like I said, it's news, weather, and sports every half hour. And that starts from the very first day of prep until almost 2 weeks after we finish shooting, because people will call you after we finish going, when we shot that thing, did we have something? So that is what the prep process is. It's meetings and scouting and figuring out the schedule and then timelining that schedule so that you can then bring it back to the producer before you start shooting and go, there's a problem here, there's a problem here, there's a problem here, and there's a problem here. And then to work to creatively solve those problems in one of 5 ways so that the creative element of the movie is satisfied, or as much as it can be, depending on what you're working on, and that the technical requirements of the film can be brought to bear. Basically, we need to make sure Scotty Phillips can get his truck where it needs to be.
I know, or the movie doesn't happen. I mean,
the movie, look, if Scotty Phillips, I will say this begrudgingly, and for those of you who are just turning in, Scotty Phillips is a gaffer who has spoken here, but Scotty Phillips is a gaffer, and if Scotty Phillips can't get his truck where it needs to be, the movie just won't happen. Just happen.
Here's a question I have just listening to you talk about this. When you start in prep, do the producers say, make this schedule fit into 45 days, 12 hours a day, or do you tell them?
No, almost universally, I get given a box to work within. And you try to bring it to that box. I will say this, in the history of my first assistant directing career, very rarely, except in television, has the schedule fallen into that box on the first try.
Oh, okay.
Like sometimes in television it does, but very rarely in features, and not always in television does it fall into that box. The producers and directors have an idea of what they want that box to be based on a budget and based on contracts sometimes that the producers have with the studios and the financiers, saying we only have enough money to shoot 65 days. And typically I'll get told, let's make a 65-day schedule. And knowing that that's the goal, I will invariably fail on my first try, because you always fail on your first try, and that's fine.
Because it's usually a hard box.
It's not always a realistic box.
Yeah.
It's a box that's built by a number or by a script that no longer exists, that someone else built. I mean, I also make a fair bit of money every year making schedules that I will never have to shoot.
Yes.
I work, someone will pay me to make a schedule for a number of days that I just give them so that they can make a budget and then hand it to another assistant director and go, look, we already have a board. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't necessarily work. But I would say 9 times out of 10, they're telling me what the box is. And I try to fit it into that box. And then we look at it constructively, myself, the director, the producer, the director of photography, and say, okay, how do we make it fit in this box? Or we need more, or we need a bigger boat. Or we need
and then of course, like you said, there are script rewrites, and then shit happens. There's always the shit happens factor. Do you ever incorporate that into your scheduling?
Sure. There's usually, when I'm building a schedule, I was taught, and I am of the opinion, and again, one thing everyone should take away from these series of talks with Daniela is that there are no hard and fast rules in film. That's right. Except perhaps don't bring live ammunition to the set. Then that's not a joke. No. There are no hard and fast rules in film. You can, it is a malleable art form. So, and it's a collective art form. So you need a whole lot of people to figure it all out. So, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. and as I always say, shit happens, and we just got to roll.
No, but sorry, to get back to the actual question, is that yes, invariably I leave. The way I was taught was to start a little bit soft and figure out where the problems are in terms of your personnel or your equipment or whatever. And then some people prefer to start very difficult and leave space at the end. I like to do a little of both. But I'm always of the opinion that it's better to start easy and let the problems shake out before you get into the hard stuff. But sometimes sometimes you just got to jump right into the hard stuff. So
I love hearing this because that's my favorite as a crew member when we start easy enough so we get to know our dynamics as a team. Yeah, for sure. Do you want to, you were saying that you have examples of do you want to show them now or do you want to? Yeah.
So this is a strip board. Can everyone see that?
It's what I call a one-line schedule.
Yeah, it's a one-line schedule, and this is the one-line schedule for Bad Boys for Life was the one I pulled out. So this is a one-line schedule, and when I say, we're the informational and logistical hub of the production, for those of you who haven't seen a schedule before, we can just run across what it means very, very quickly. So each scene has a strip. And sometimes scenes will have more than one strip if you carve them into parts. So there's the scene number. You can see my cursor, yeah?
Yep.
Every strip on the schedule has a scene number, where it takes place, inside or outside, the name of the place it takes place, not the actual location, but the location in the movie on the header of the scene. Script days, which I'm sure Daniela and I will get into talking about, because that is the intersection of ADing and script supervising right there. Days, how many pages? I'm sure Daniela has talked at length about 8s of pages and whatnot. Every cast member is given a number, and this is the cast that's in the scene. And my strip boards, you can design. This is a very specialized program called Movie Magic that assistant directors use, and some script supervisors use, actually. And some visual effects people use it. And it doesn't. Now you can design these strips any way you want. And for instance, my strip boards have the number of extras that are in a scene, and also little initials like that. PB means playback in the scene. So with one glance at that day, I can tell you that we've got 10 extras in the scene. We need a playback operator for video screens in the thing, and that we're going to start inside and then move outside again, which looks insane, but it was the right thing to do that day. And that's a strip board. Now, the way this is created is every strip has a larger breakdown inside of it. Where you do the data input for all these things. That day we needed a 60-foot condor because someone like Scotty said so. It wasn't Scotty, but someone like Scotty said we needed a 60-foot condor that day. And like I said, we needed a video playback op. And so that stuff shows up, where we want. I even break down the stand-ins because there's a way to generate a report. And speaking of reports, this program generates a report of characters and which days they work. It's called a day out of days.
Yes.
And start work is SW, and it tells me what day, if I need to look up what day character Mike, played by Will Smith, is working on and what days he has off. And he's very interested. I will tell you, having done 2 movies with Will, he's very interested in which days he has off.
Yes.
Very few, because he's the star of the movie. So this generates a report that tells me when each person is working and on what day. And you can do that with just about any element in the show.
Can you also talk about the color coding on the strips?
Sure. Let's go back to the strips. We are not back to the strips. Sorry. Every AD does it differently. And depending on the type of show you're on, sometimes you'll want to assign colors to things, but I would say 99% of assistant directors use this as the color code. So white is generally interior day. Yellow is exterior day. And the way you remember that is you need to worry about sunlight, the big ball of fire in the sky that Scotty does not control, because the grips control it. And universally, it's not universal, but 99% of assistant directors use green as interior night. And let's scroll down. And typically, I don't know why that's blue. Interior. See, we did different. Exterior night is typically blue. So at a glance, like you can be scrolling through and you're like, no, day. I need to get to the night work. Oh, there's the night work. So it's just another handy way of quickly at a glance seeing when the work takes place and where the work takes place, so you can quickly figure out what it is you need to do.
Yeah, let's talk about the story day page count. If this is a good, I think this might
Sure.
be a good segue into it, because you guys do a story day breakdown, we do a story breakdown, and we do our page count separately. Then we come together and have this discussion, email or meeting about it, right?
Yeah,
I've actually been on shows.
Costumes is involved in that.
Yes, costumes. Yes,
and
absolutely.
sometimes hair makeup as well. Hair makeup will usually defer to whatever costume says. I would say 99% of the time, hair makeup will go, yeah, whatever costume says. I'm sure they're right.
Yeah.
But sometimes hair more than makeup, sometimes has opinions about like, okay, it's the same day, but she had to change her hair. At which point I will go, why? But they're usually right. I'm usually wrong. But yeah, typically we, like you said, I'll do a day breakdown, figuring out what day of the movie it is. And people have different theories about how to represent that. There's and again, there's no real rules about that. I usually call the first day the movie starts in present time, day one. And then if there's flashbacks or flash forwards or whatever, I'll call them FB days or FF days. But in present time of the movie, I generally number 1 to whatever. And then because I typically start on the movie before the script supervisor, and sometimes before, usually the costume department and I start around the same time. But they don't get around to their day breakdown until a couple of weeks after I've already made one. And sometimes my first one is a good one for both script supervisors and costumes to look at and go like, what is he thinking? Like, and I'm fine with that. Like the one thing I've always said is like best idea wins. And if I've incorrectly assumed something was a day break when it wasn't, and vice versa. And anyone who's got a better plan or idea, or anyone who is, adamant about what the day breakdown is welcome to come and talk to me about it, and I'll change it, because that's never a hill to die on.
Listen, I was on a show where I did 36 days and the producers are like, we can't afford 36 days. So they met with the ADs and got it down to 21 just for budget reasons. And that wins too, because it has to.
What is interesting about that is eventually I will say again, 99% of the movies I've done, there will be the longest day in motion picture history somewhere in that movie. Somewhere around the second act. And for those of you who write, I can tell you this is a thing. Somewhere around the middle to the end of the second act of a 3-act film, or mid-third act of a 5-act television show, will be the longest day ever, or longest night ever, or both. Because you just, like, stuff keeps happening, right? So, and then when it comes to page counts are calculated in 1/8 of pages, for those of you who don't already know. And I have a ruler that I put next to the page. I don't do that as much anymore now that I'm almost completely digital, but I'll look at it, eye it up, that looks like a half, that looks like 3/8, whatever, and you do the totals and you figure it out. And in scenes that you carve into little bits, you got to give a little bit of the page count to each little bit. And then because I start before the script supervisor, invariably the script supervisor will come on and tell me where I've made mistakes. And in the past, I was always very adamant that like my page count was right when I was a younger, inexperienced second. And now I'm like, whatever you want.
Except when it's production reasons, right? Like you said, VFX unit needs an 8.
Yeah. Studios are very attached to that as a measuring device for how you're doing. Which I've always thought was silly, because if you look at the script for Gone with the Wind is the famous example, like 1/8 of a page, Atlanta burns. So it's not always an effective measurement device for progress. and there's somebody in a cubicle at an office in a studio in Burbank who will look at what you shot that day and be like, well, the script supervisor put that it was that you completed 5/8 of a page, but the whole day was 7/8 on the call sheet. Where's the other 2/8? And are we behind? Should we call somebody? Is this a budget alert? And it's like, no, guys, we're shooting a car chase, and those 2/8 are going to go to another day, or I miscalculated or whatever. So yes, it's important to be accurate, but I will tell you, after 35 years in the business and 25 of them being as an AD, that if you're off by an 8 or 2 in terms of a 2-page scene or a 3-page scene, and I say it's 3 1/8 and Daniela says it's 3, if you're off by that much, it's not the end of the world. It's important to be precise. Somebody somewhere thinks it's very important that every 1/8 of a page is accounted for. But I would tell you there isn't a single movie in the history of motion pictures where it actually added up properly at the end. It can't. It is impossible to make the page count at the end of a shoot equal what you had at the beginning of the shoot. It just, you have to fudge the numbers at some point.
Yeah. And, we that's why it's important to ask for wrap time, because we're the ones that get asked to make it reconcile.
People have different theories about how that should work within the assistant director and script supervisor world. Like, some people think you give an 1/8 of a page to everything you shoot. And some people are like, well, if I've credited everything other places and we're doing pickups, then I'm not going to give it any page count because we've already credited the scene, but we need a shot of the keys, or we need,
some of that school of inserts.
Yeah, like, you don't have to give it page count because it's credited somewhere else. And here's what we're shooting. Don't worry about the page count, which is actually the way I've been doing it the last couple of years. Like, if I've run out of legit page count, I won't give it a page count now. But I remember when I started, everything got an 1/8 of a page. So, it's, as long as the assistant director, and usually the second assistant director, because I will tell you that as a first assistant director, someone starts talking to me about page counts and I go, talk to them. It's usually the second assistant director and not that I don't care, because I care. But usually the second assistant director and the script supervisor need to make that number work. And I will bring a call sheet draft as a second assistant director to the script supervisor before I publish to say, is this jiving with your numbers? If an AD can get on the same page with the script supervisor throughout the show, everyone's life will be easier.
Yes, I agree. Now, as a first, because you were known as a veteran, top second for so many years, but now that you're a first, having that perspective, what do you see as being the most important qualities of your second?
Of my second?
Yeah.
Do it like I would have, or not. In certain instances, maybe not. No, the most important thing as a first I need in a second AD is to make sure they're having actual conversations with people about what the next day's work is, or the next week's work, or whatever's coming up. This is a larger conversation, but the role of the assistant director, not just the first assistant director, but the assistant director department, is to look around and say, who needs the most amount of help today, right now? Who needs some help in about 3 hours? Who needs help in about 2 days? And who needs help a week from now? You organize your day based on that. And the most important thing to me is that my second AD is looking for who needs the most amount of, I like to say help, but the real word is information. And information is help. So, but I'll use the word help. So I want my second AD to be looking down the road at stuff people aren't thinking about, and not just at tomorrow, because I find sometimes second ADs get really wrapped up into the tomorrow of it all, because you're building a call sheet that is about tomorrow, and that's always right in front of you. But if you're only looking at that, you can't see what's over there. So it's important to me that my second assistant director can identify and have conversations about things that are coming down the pike that aren't tomorrow. When I was a second AD, I would stop and look at the next week and 2 weeks and go what conversations do I need to have today to make sure I don't get creamed a week from now? because if you wait till the day before to look at timing or extras or where the extras are going to go or where the trucks are going to park, or if you don't know the answer to something that's 2 weeks down the line, that you need to be able to identify that problem before the night before, because identifying problems the night before is almost useless. Look, we've all done it. We all have to think on our feet and do stuff at the last minute, but I want somebody who's thinking more than a day ahead. A day ahead is great. But I need someone who's thinking at least 2 weeks ahead, sometimes a month ahead. And
this is so tied to what we do as script supervisors, because information sharing and anticipating problems saves money. Communication is what saves money on a film production.
And look, sometimes there aren't answers, but it's important for the assistant director department, specifically the second, because while you're shooting, the first is up to his eyes in the management of the floor. And still, as a first, you need to keep a part of your brain for thinking about 2 weeks from now. But, while you're making sure the floor is safe, I need to know I've got somebody watching my back going, you know what? Locations never told me on the scout where the extras were going to dress. We're 2 weeks away from that. And even if they still don't know and still haven't found a place, I want my second AD to do what I used to do, which is 2 weeks away from something that I don't know about, to start going, hey, where are the extras getting dressed? And we haven't found it yet. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to know by this date. And I will tell you, you could call it a lie, but I like to think of it as more deadlining, is saying, look, I need to know in 2 days, because if I don't know in 2 days, then I can't tell ACTRA that there aren't washrooms where they're getting dressed, or we're all just giving a little bit of motivation, even if it's a little white. Always be honest, but giving deadlines to stuff like that sort of helps that along. Mm-hmm. I would never tell anyone to lie, but
yes.
But the honesty is always the best policy. But giving deadlines, even if they're false deadlines, about why I need something when I need it, if it's not crucial end of the world stuff, it will speed up the process and say, look, I need to know in 2 days so that I can tell costumes that they need this many racks and this is the space and I need pictures and I need to send pictures to. As a second, I need to send pictures to costumes to show them where they're dressing and blah, 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 blah. Like all the things. And if they fail in that 2 day window, but they get it on the third day, we win. So sorry, it came off like it's okay to lie. It's not okay to lie.
No.
To give motivation and information about why we need what we need. But the most important thing for a second AD is to be able to anticipate problems. The best compliment I ever received was from a UPM producer who said, we want Darrin here as a second. Says, we want Darrin here because he can see problems around corners.
Yes.
So that's what I want in my second AD. I want someone who can see around corners.
Great.
Like just looking at that.
Yeah. Great answer.
And sometimes you get drowned in that. So, and that will happen. But invariably, you need to get back to a personal organizational system within yourself that makes you go, okay, I know this is important, but what about that thing next week? I don't know where the extras are getting dressed. Like, I don't know where the trucks are being parked.
So I mentioned this to you. It's still shocking to me that there's this trend happening in Ontario and I think in other places, but definitely I'm seeing it a lot in Ontario non-union world, where my script supervisors are being asked to simultaneously first AD, which I always tell them is a horrible idea. But let's talk about what you have to do on set as a first AD to really show them why that's a horrible idea.
Okay, well, that's insane and unsafe. So that shouldn't ever happen. Yeah, script supervisors need to be worrying about the script and notes and, did they pick up the cup in their right hand or their left hand or whatever. All the black magic you people do. But no, like my typical day is a first, like I said, it's all won and lost in prep. So if you haven't prepped it properly, you're screwed anyways. But you want to run through my typical day as a first assistant director, or
like what your major responsibilities are, because I think people don't know.
Okay, so when I was coming up and I was a young brash assistant director, I am perfectly comfortable with acknowledging that I was a bit of a cranky son of a bitch. I took it all very seriously about delivering the cast to the set and delivering the extras to the set and making sure the prop got to the set and all that stuff. And I would not scream and yell, but I've allowed actory voice. So, people didn't always react to that in the best fashion. But what I came to realize, I think, about my second or third show as a second AD, and what I've carried with me as a first AD, because I was trained by some of the best people in Toronto, is that my primary responsibility every single day in prep or shoot is to make sure everybody goes home safe at the end of the day. Everything else is second to that. Yes, I have other job responsibilities that are very important in terms of the efficient workflow on the set, making sure what we need for the next scene is standing by to shoot. Like if we had a gun in one scene, if we don't have a gun in one scene, we need the gun in the other scene, or we can talk about guns another time. A baseball bat. Let's say, I'm shooting a scene that doesn't need a baseball bat, and then the next scene has a baseball bat. I'm making sure on the last setup or second last setup of the scene I'm shooting, I'm talking on myself, or my second or my third is talking to the props department and saying, hey, let's have that bat standing by for the blocking of the next scene. Just making sure the cast are there, making sure the cast are getting ready at the right time. There's a myriad of responsibilities, from as macro as this battleship is going to sail through the straits and then turn around and come back and we'll do it again on a loop, to as micro as we're not going to break for lunch for another 15 minutes and let's break all the extras first. Even though we never break the extras first, but those people aren't working the scene, so break them for lunch first. If the crew gets upset about it, tell them they can come and talk to me and I'll explain why we broke the extras. So it's death by a thousand cuts, there's a lot to do, but mostly it's about keeping everyone on task and making sure everyone has the information they need or the help they need to get their job done from minute to minute to hour to, like I said, with the second AD, week to week, and to come up with creative problem solving on the fly when things do go sideways. But like I said, all of that, there are people who believe that is my only job. Scotty would believe that speaking loudly and asking him if he's going to be very much longer is my most important job. But really, my most important job is making sure everything is safe. And you only garner that kind of knowledge from experience and having good people train you and understanding that. But I've said no before to things and been fired for that. I'm hopeful that won't have to happen again, but I don't have a problem saying no, but you know what I mean? Like it's never good to go, no, absolutely no, 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 no. There's a way to say no and not get fired. Sometimes, there's a way to say, no, I don't think that's going to work, but let's take 5 minutes with you, me, the stunt coordinator, and the key grip. And let's figure out a better, safer way to do that. And I would say 99% of the time, you can find an easier, better, smarter, safer way to do something where the first idea that probably nobody talked about ever before was dangerous or risky, because it's only a movie and people shouldn't die making movies.
Right. Oh no. Yeah. I've had friends definitely lose their jobs for standing up for safety. Without like going into the situation on rest, because we weren't there. We don't really know all the facts. But I would love for you to iterate, because now people are scared, right? They're scared anytime there are guns on set. Yeah. What is the actual protocol when there are guns on set?
Well, number one is that I have never, nor will I ever be in a situation where there is a actual bullet, because a lot of incorrect nomenclature has been thrown around in the last little while about live round, misfire. Let's just use simple terms because I'm not very smart. Bullet. There is never a moment on a film set where you need an actual bullet. to fire out of a weapon. So number one, there's never any live ammunition, real bullet around. That's something I am not in control of, nor would I ever, before last week, ever have thought to ask. You'll know now that I will now be asking that question. Even though I probably don't need to, nor should I have to, but now it's something that will need to be said quietly to an armorer. At some point, I'm like, we have no real bullets anywhere near this production. No. Are you sure about that? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. And there's a way to do it without insulting somebody. It's like, I got to ask. But typically what happens, there's been a lot written by armorers in the last few weeks about what their process is with a gun. Mm-hmm. So I can tell you what my process is with a gun, but ideally guns are stored safely overnight, either in a locked truck or in a locked office inside a locked closet, a locked cabinet inside a locked office. The guns, once they bring the guns they need for the day to set, they have a cart that locks, or a trunk on a trolley, a trunk on a wagon, a locked trunk on a wagon, and the guns we need for the day are in there. If there's a lot of guns, if you're doing, a bunch of guys with semi-automatic machine guns, then typically there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 armorers. The difference between the United States and Canada notwithstanding, like we have armorers and specialized police that you cannot use blanks without those people. In the States, props masters with certain gun licenses are allowed to be the ones in charge of the weaponry. Either way, the person in charge of the weaponry is and I've been working on larger action pictures in the States where it's like, we have an armorer. It's not the props department. It's an armorer because we miniguns and AR-15s, and you need someone whose only job is the guns. If you're doing a cop show where, every, 3 times an episode, someone pulls a gun out or 2 guns out, then if the props department in the States is in charge of it, it's fine, as long as they do the right thing. So guns are safely stored. Before we shoot, we'll obviously rehearse. When we block before rehearsal, if I ask for a gun for a blocking tip, I would say 90% of the time I'm asking for a rubber gun or a replica gun that does not fire, that in no way is able to fire even a blank. Mm-hmm. Because for a blocking, you never need to fire the weapon. So why would I bring a weapon? Sometimes I will keep, if I'm doing a very gun heavy scene, sometimes I actually own a bright red rubber pistol that I keep in my waistband. And when I bring it out, I will hold the wrong end towards the camera, just as an extra, like there's no way anything's firing. If we're lining up on a gun, occasionally I will keep a bright red rubber pistol in my belt if I feel I'd rather not have to hand off rubber guns to stand-ins and stuff like that. I'm more than happy to stand on the mark with the gun with a rubber gun the wrong way around to line up on. But if I need to block and if the actor needs to be holding some version of a gun in his hand, then he's holding a rubber or empty gun. And before that gun gets into an actor's hand for a blocking, he comes over and shows it to me that it's empty. He'll shine a light from the muzzle of the gun back towards the breech if it's a semi-automatic, or if it's a rubber gun, and then if it is a replica which doesn't fire anything except it just moves back and forth with gas, or if it's an empty real gun, which we've blocked with before, and he's shown me it's empty, he's shown the actor it's empty, anyone else who wants to see that it's empty, he will dry fire it at the ground 2 or 3 times. He'll pull the trigger shooting towards the ground to prove to everybody, at which point me using my big loud voice, I would be saying, empty gun, dry firing, thank you, everyone's seen it, cold gun. At that point, it's only at that point, once he's dry fired, even if he's shown me, if the armorer has dry fired or shown me it's a rubber gun, I would then feel comfortable yelling cold gun, or the armorer can yell cold gun, or the props master can yell cold gun. those are the only people who can yell cold gun or safe gun. So we'll block and figure out where everyone stands and where the guns point with empty guns that have been demonstrated to me that were empty. And also with long guns, with AR-15s, we almost never block with the long guns. We do this. Like, stuntmen actually were the ones who taught me that's representing a long gun. And until you've got a camera up, there's no reason to do anything except that. Some people carry painted black broomsticks or painted bright green broomsticks so you can see the gun. Anyways, so then everyone goes to work lighting the scene and setting up cameras. And then when it's time for a rehearsal, we go through all that again with the empty guns or rubber guns or safe guns, demonstrating to everybody, first me, then the actor, then anyone else who wants to see that the guns are empty, cold, and safe. And then once that's been called, then we can rehearse. Once we are happy with rehearsal, I will then say, okay, let's get ready to shoot. Final checks, final whatever. Everybody does their thing. But what does not happen is the armorer does not begin putting blanks in the gun until I say, let's go hot. And the cadence of when to go hot is always a conversation with the armorer, the stunt coordinator, and sometimes the cameraman, the camera operator, sorry, about what sequence in which we should put blank ammunition into the gun, in front of camera. 90% of the time I would load guns, go hot, roll camera. However, if sometimes you're doing something closer to camera or a little edgy, sometimes I'll roll the camera first. And if you're only firing one shot or two shots, I will say, let's roll the camera, please. And let's go hot on the weapon. So occasionally armorers will start putting blanks in the gun if it's in their hand before I say, let's go hot. But we never, a gun with blank ammunition in it is never put into an actor's hand until I, as the assistant director, say, let's go hot on the weapon. And that's because I've checked the 30 things that need to happen around the camera for safety. People can't be in a certain area. Actors can't stand in a certain area. We put up protection for the camera and the lens. There's a myriad of things we do shot to shot that before I will say, let's go hot on the weapon.
Oh, and props will hand out eye and ear protection too.
Yeah, hand out eye and ear protection. There's a long checklist of things that happen every single time we bring out a weapon. It's different shot to shot because some shots you need the Lexan, some shots you don't. Sometimes you got to put a heavy moving blanket over the camera operator to protect him from gas and anything that might come in. Like, we have a million things that both the armorer and the camera operator and the stunt coordinator will ask for, and I will double check about and ask if we have, and if I don't feel it's safe, we're not going hot on the weapon. And like in our rehearsal, we will say, you know, if the weapon's pointed here, can he be standing there? And sometimes the answer is no, and then the camera has to move 3 inches and the actor has to move 3 inches, and then it all works. Or we have to move a foot, or we just have to mime, we have to use an empty gun, mime it, and VFX going. All these, there's a myriad of checklists to go through, and no two situations are the same. So you have to ask every time, do we need this? Ear and eye protection is never not available or handed out. But that is the process of bringing a gun and using a gun on a film set. And thank you for going through that. And we could get into like stunts and all that, but that's yeah. It's always case by case. It's a case by case basis, but there are some things that are invaluable. Yeah. There's never a real bullet anywhere near the set. I've asked real police officers to leave the set because they had similar guns to the ones we were using in the scene. And I just didn't, even though we have great armors and it would probably never happen. I just wouldn't want anybody with a similar type weapon to be in the wrong place and someone grabs the wrong weapon and whatever. So first off, there's never a real bullet anywhere on a film set ever, which now I guess we need to ask about. And always ear and eye protection. And you never fire a gun until everyone has talked about it. And that includes a safety meeting as well.
Yes.
Before you shoot, before you shoot each shot, not just at the beginning of the day, before you shoot each shot when using a weapon with blank ammunition, there must be a safety meeting right before you do the shot to explain what we're doing, how many rounds are in the gun, who's going to do it, and everybody is welcome to ask questions and everybody is welcome to voice their concerns.
Great. Thank you for going into that much detail, because I think people are scared and nervous now about gun use. But
and look, I've fought before on shows and been like, guys, why aren't we just using a gas gun which doesn't fire anything? It up, and VFX can put in the things like we're making ourselves nuts loading 15 weapons here. Let's get gas replicas. And sometimes directors and sometimes VFX supervisors are like, no, it'll be too expensive to put in the gun, and blah, 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 and it looks better. Directors are always very concerned about how it looks better. And yes, there's no question that firing blank ammunition looks great on camera. And I'm not one of those people advocating for never having blank ammunition, guns with blank ammunition on camera. There's a time when you can do it. And case in point, like, this doesn't happen very often at all. Like, the last time an incident like this happened was 20 years ago. Like,
yeah.
And when you think about the millions and millions and millions of rounds fired on thousands of television shows and movies, we, by and large, are incredibly safe.
Yes.
With the weapons. But I'm now happy. I mean, I'm not happy this happened, but I'm happy that now the conversation about only using blank ammunition when you absolutely positively need it will now be a more valid conversation and be taken a little more seriously, because we are at the point with visual effects where we can do 90% of what we've been doing with visual effects and replica guns instead of blank ammunition.
I really want to talk about your work with the director, because that's a whole, I do have a lot of directors in this program, and how can they best utilize their first AD, and what's an ideal version of that relationship like?
My job as a first assistant director is to service their vision. My job is to say yes. And sometimes that's a great place to be, and sometimes that's not a great place to be. But ultimately, the responsibility for the no is on the producer. When we, like I said, during prep, we go out and we scout and we look at things and find locations and figure out how long things are going to take. And then I bring the plan as I see it to the producer, and we sit with the director and producer, figure it out. But when the director wants something that's not going to fit into the box that's been built, it's not my job to say no. It is sometimes my job to say, could we instead do this and find a creative solution to service the director's vision? My job is to deliver all the elements that the director needs to complete his vision of what the scene is in a timely and efficient manner as possible. The only time that I don't have a problem saying no is when safety is concerned. But again, that can always turn into a no but, or a what if we. But my job working with the director is to figure out what he or she wants, and what has been agreed to with the producer about what will be delivered from what they want, and how to deliver that in a timely and effective fashion. And that includes the running of the set and running it. Look, there are some directors who don't want me to call action. There's directors who want me to call action. But really, it's collaborating with the director and figuring out what his desires are, mostly through asking questions and being like we all have a shorthand in film. Like when we read a scene, those of us who've been doing it a long time, you read it and you go, okay, well, this, and this. Oh, does he want that or that? And if that, then this. So it's through a process of, making notes while reading the script, and asking questions and sitting and having time with the director to ask those questions, that you figure out what they want. And if there's something that's out of the box or doesn't work or doesn't fit, then it's my job to flag that to a producer and have that producer say, I'm sorry, director X. Well, I shouldn't say that because that's someone's real name. Sorry, sorry, director Z. We don't have it in the budget to do that. But you know what I was thinking? What if we did this? Or I'll trade you. There's a lot of, especially in television, there's a lot of horse trading that goes on. It's like, well, you can't have a crane this day, but I tell you what, if you move that one scene to the next day, you can have a crane because we have a crane that day. You can only have yay many things, and it's my job to move the puzzle pieces around. But really, my job is to make it so the director can show up every day. His or her actors are there on the set with all the things that need to be there to make the movie, and so that the director can show up and go, action.
Yes.
I'm there to put all the other pieces in place so the director can just say, okay, let's see it. Let's do a rehearsal, and I'll take care of the rest.
That's great. We go through a little bit of a similar process of what if, when things don't make logical sense, we have that one thing does translate over to us. Does this relationship with the director, because directors are different in TV, does that change from film to television?
Absolutely, it does. Film is a director's medium. Television is somewhat a writer's medium, depending. You know, like I said, there are no rules and everything is different. But typically, even in television, though, I have said to producers who I am responsible to, I have said to producers, look, I'm the assistant director. I'm here to bring his or her vision to the screen. If it doesn't match what you guys want, then you guys need to have a conversation. And sometimes I've been caught in the middle of that. Being like, you tell him that she can't do this. And I'm like, no, you two should talk about that. In film, it's a little different. In film, budget permitting, more often than not on larger studio features, pretty much anything the director wants will show up. And also directors in major motion picture feature film, the AD is more responsible to the director than the overall production, whereas in television, you have to walk a bit of a tightrope in terms of, you know, the show is really administered by the showrunner. The director is there to service that vision, and I'm there to service the director's vision based on the showrunner's vision. So as an AD, sometimes in television, when you see stuff that's not consistent with the tone of the show, sometimes you have to put up your hand and go, you know, you don't want to be a stool pigeon, but sometimes you got to go, hey, director Z, you should call showrunner B, because I'm not sure that is how we do things. And look, sometimes showrunners go, great, you know what, make it different, make it interesting. And sometimes showrunners go, no, thanks for calling. Actually, what I'd like is. So
we have that in TV. We have that same role. The AD, the script supervisor, the DOP. We're there to make sure there's a consistency to the look, even. And so we have to have those hard conversations sometimes with the director, all three of us. But yes, it's really the showrunners. We're caught in that same place you are, where we work for the producer, but we work so closely with the director that's a real diplomacy.
In television, typically you serve two masters. In film, you still serve two masters, but
yes.
but one is bigger than the other.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. The film is more the director's medium. And just because we have so many script supervisors here, do you want to talk about what for you is an ideal AD script supervisor relationship, either from the second and the first perspective?
I'm always a big fan of, as a younger, less experienced first AD, I would get a little twisted if a script supervisor was like questioning what I did, how I set up extras or matching anything on a table or whatever. And I wouldn't get twisted, but I'd be a little like, Now that I'm older and wiser, I appreciate another set of eyes on what I'm doing, which is the script supervisor's job. And I've been saved by good script supervisors. And as a first, I always, now that I'm older and wiser, I really appreciate the second set of eyes. If I feel strongly about something and the script supervisor has a different opinion, I have no problem saying, no, 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 I really think it should be this. But it always, you got to be respectful about it, and you got to have, adult conversations. And look, and I've won those and been right, and I've won those and been wrong. Mostly about eyeline or left hand, right hand, which now I stay out of completely.
Yeah. I was going to say,
I have learned my lesson about staying out of the eyeline conversation, letting the camera operator, the director, and the script supervisor sort out eyelines, and I'll just be like, tell me where you want it. I learned to stay out of that conversation, even though I know what the right answer is.
Yeah.
There are times as a first AD that just let the people who do this for a living figure that out.
Well, because then we have to wear it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm never going to wear that. So until the script supervisor throws me under the bus and goes, well, Darrin said. And I learned that lesson the hard way with, I think it was Jill Carter. Yeah, it was Jill Carter many, many moons ago.
Yeah.
And as a second, I would say what I appreciate in my relationship with the script supervisor is the information flow, either now via text or email, or back in the day, face-to-face, talking about what we talked about before, which were page counts and script days, and does this make sense to anybody? Yeah. Like, just it's another set of eyes. Having another set of eyes makes me feel like I'm not out there without a tightrope, because as a second, especially now, very frequently, there was a class of unit production manager when I was starting as a second who would really tear my call sheets apart. Red pen all over it. Not just and spelling mistakes and whatever. And I'm not one of those ADs who's crazy about spelling. Like, if there's a typo in terms of spelling, who cares? As long as the director's name and the lead actor's name is correct, I don't care. But there was a class of PMs who would tear my call sheets apart with a red pen, which has gone away recently a lot. And maybe it's just a vote of confidence in my experience, but there's a lot of PMs now who just really don't look at it very much. They flip to the back and tell the grips they can't have that many dailies. Like, that's all they'll look at. But I miss the red pen, and having someone, whether it's a UPM or a script supervisor or even a production office coordinator, which never happens anymore.
Yeah, it used to.
Read my work as a second or as a first that, who's put something on a call sheet that I asked the second to put on. Having another set of eyes that isn't me look at what the plan is and go, that's not going to work. Or you know what? That's not how that is. Or even correcting a spelling mistake because it means someone looked.
Right, right. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of that anymore. In terms of looking at the overall, people now tend to zero in on the shit they care about. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the script supervisor as another set of eyes on not just the number in the script day, the page count in the script day, but seeing what's going on and going, oh, you know what? Why are we shooting that at night? We're doing nights on Friday. Why are we doing this at night on Wednesday? And there may be a reason for that, but yeah. Now, as an older, smarter human, I appreciate having to defend my plan to somebody who wants to know why. Whereas in the past, I would have been like, then you fucking do it. But now I realize the value of someone going, hey, why is that like that? And most of the time, there's a reason for that, but every once in a while, I'd say once or twice a movie, someone will catch me and I'll go, oh, huh. That was a plan we had like the first week of prep, and it never changed based on what we're doing now. Thank you. I'm going to move that or change that because it's a better idea. And thank you for giving me that idea. Like, sometimes you lose the forest for the trees, and it's always good to have someone like a script supervisor who knows the script as well as you do. Which is, I will say this, as an AD, I need to know the script backwards and forwards, where everything connects, as well as, if not better than the script supervisor, because...
Impossible.
But having torn it all apart,
Yeah.
If I need to know the script as well as the script supervisor does, and as well as the director does. Otherwise, I can't do my job properly.
And this is the other thing, script supervisors and most of the crew, they don't know the union rules. As you have to know every single union's rules.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that difficult. Most of them are pretty similar. There's also a cheat sheet. So sorry, there's two things. One is called Welch's rules. There, are you seeing my screen?
The Jeffords rules, New
Yeah,
York.
so that's Jeffords rules. And this is a cheat sheet that gets put out every 3 years or 4 years with all the rules for every union condensed. Like, it's not the long form that has a million pages. I think the whole thing's 20 pages, and
Wow.
it's digital, and you can everything from change or cancellation of calls to weather permitting calls, turnaround rest period per union. This is the New York one, but that's for East. And then there's Welch's rules, which are there
For Canada or for West?
for Canada, states, everything. There's DGC, DGA, 873, ACTRA, AFTRA, like SAG-AFTRA, ACTRA rules, 30-mile zone. It's very US centric, but there are ACTRA rules, and each local has different rules, so you got to look them up anyway.
I'm going to ask you this because I ask every single veteran this. Do you have any war stories of like a really a big situation that you were able to get the crew out of?
I would say I was a first AD on a show shooting in Hungary, and the director didn't prep very well. I kept asking, can we do a meeting? Can we have some time? Let's go back to the locations and shot list and figure stuff out. And he was very resistant to that. Him and his director of photography were very much, we need to have creative inspiration on the day, which needs to always be room for that. You need to leave room to find something great in a day. But like I said, prep is essential. And unfortunately, he set up an unsafe scenario off the top of his head, and I was forced to say, no, we can't. And there was a safe way to do it, but it was going to cost us most of the day in order to re-rig. And we really had nothing to jump to. And I got fired over it because we lost. Oh, no. Yeah, no, which was fine. What he wanted to do would have put the actress in grave danger. I'm not going to give the name of the show, and I'm not going to tell you the specifics of the situation, except that what he wanted to do was something that was never discussed in prep, was not in his storyboards that he talked about, and he came up with on the day, which would have been able to be accomplished had we had more than 5 minutes of warning. And I did what I had seen the people who trained me do, which is, no, I'm sorry, we cannot do that, but we can give you that shot if we spend 3.5 hours rigging it, and I've got about an hour of work. We're going to be down for 2 solid hours. And he was very upset that I would tell him he can't do what he wanted to do. But if we had done what he wanted to do the way he wanted to do it, the actress would have been put in very grave danger. So I said no. And
good for you.
3 days later, I was fired.
And 3 days later, you probably had another gig.
Which is fine. Like I said, I'm always, I hope to never be fired again, but to be fired in the name of safety, I'm fine with that. That's an example. I mean, some of the hardest things I've ever had to do was as a second in Prague on the film Heart's War. See, this one I can name names. It's 20 years ago. Heart's War, like Jeff Authors, who's a legendary first assistant director in Toronto, JJ, was timing we had 2 Spitfire airplanes doing strafing runs along the ground. So JJ had to time a moving train, the Spitfire airplanes, and the ground bullets. We had actual squibs in the ground, like strafing runs. Now you just do it CGI. It was 22 years ago. Timing those 3 things all together and being a part of that. I will say this, JJ was the one who figured out how to time it. We did we did a rehearsal on film essentially that did not work, and we knew it wouldn't work. To figure out the timing, because it's not something you immediately can know and do on the first take unless it's a fluke. But if you do it once, you can figure out, if the airplane is at that, I tell the train to start moving at that, and I call the strafe run when the airplane gets to X. If you do it once, then you can replicate it just by visual landmarks. So being a part of putting that together was one of the greatest challenges I've ever been a part of. I will also say that one of the greatest moments I've ever had making movies, like big movie stuff, was as a second on Bad Boys for Life, shutting down Ocean Drive in Miami, like the center of all fun and party in Miami. And, we were night shooting, so I was the first one there with the police captain with the Miami Beach Police. And at 5 p.m., 5:01 p.m., standing beside the police captain and the location manager going like this. Let's lock it up. Lock it up, lock it up, lock it up. And watching the street empty out and having it become ours, and then dressing the street with our cars and stuff, and just gradually gaining control of the street. I've only had that experience on such a major, iconic downtown area, and like hundreds of cops and we had over 100 PAs. And
wow.
I've only ever had that a couple of times, and once here in Toronto on Yonge Street for the Hulk, and once on Bad Boys for Life, where we shut down Ocean Drive. And that was difficult, but also very rewarding. Like, it's funny because when you see that sequence on film, you go, we only ever really saw a block and a half. But, we shut it down for 6 blocks. But the feeling of being able to, let's shut it down, like it was power. And then helping to bring that plan to fruition, was something I really enjoyed.
Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. All right, everybody. Now you have your chance to pick Darrin's brain and ask him what you like. Either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask your question.
So, yeah, I mean, in my, just to kind of go over the process that I, usually do with the first AD and prep, I would love your feedback, just sort of as like, obviously informed sort of outsider. Well, not out, but just, not where we're not actually working together. But so, yeah, I mean, normally, because like page 8, so page 8, story days, cast scheduling, and like essentially scheduling all of the scenes to shoot is stuff that I will look over. So normally, I get the script and I'll break down all that stuff. I'll measure the page 8s. I will figure out what I think all the story days are. I will figure out what cast I think should be in every scene. And then I'll get all the AD paperwork, and I will basically check everything. And then I'll also include on my breakdown what shoot days you have planned, that every scene has been scheduled for a certain day, just to make sure that, okay, well, there's no scenes that haven't been scheduled. Okay. And then, when I look at your page 8s, because you will have page 8s and story days usually before me, or those will exist before me, I'll do my own, and then I'll just check yours. And then normally, if you're off by like an 1/8 or 2, I'll just change mine. If there's a major discrepancy, then I'll just bring it up with you and be like, I came up with a different number here. How do we, because my belief is that we need to match our page 8s. And I've been pretty successful in the past, having all the page 8s accounted for and zeroed out by the last day of shooting. So I really make sure about that. But
there's no Oscar for that.
I know, right?
I mean, I've heard of another script supervisor told me that they count all the page 8s and then they just send it in and say, here's all the correct page 8s.
No.
I've had that done to me before, and that makes me look at it a little slower, but I will look at it, if only to cover my own ass. I prefer a conversation. And sorry, I did allude to it earlier. What has gotten lost, and especially the last 10 years, is the art of having a conversation with people about things instead of just sending emails. One of the things I find most essential is to have a conversation with someone about whether it's page eights or script day or whatever, or anything with any department, is to have a face-to-face conversation or a phone call. No one wants to talk on the phone anymore. To have a real conversation about something, even if it's something as little as like a difference of 2/8 of a page, because then that might trigger another conversation about something else. But I would always prefer an email saying, hey, I have a question about XYZ, can we talk? Or I have a question about XYZ, and then lay it out and just do it via email. But I would always prefer to have someone flag something to me, ask to speak to me about it, or speak to me about it in the email, than saying, here's where you're wrong, because that's not effective.
Okay, amazing. And then another thing you did mention earlier about page eights was that you kind of maybe let the second AD, like, or you'll kind of maybe curb that to the second AD more than dealing with it yourself.
Oh yeah. Well, look, every team works differently. When I break down the script for the first time, I'll put page eights in, and they're very rough and they're whatever. And that gets refined as the schedule gets refined. But look, as a second, I've worked, like when I worked with Pierre Henry, after, he would, we worked in series television. So I would break down the next episode before he would even read it. Like I would give him a chronological board that he'd put into days. And by the end of our career, I was scheduling the next episode, putting it into chunks, and he would change 2 or 3 things and be like, yeah, this is our schedule. Because the nature of TV schedules is such, you've got actor availability and location availability, and whatever's left is your schedule. So, typically I would do a rough pass at page eights for very, very first board. And then myself and the second would do a more detailed deep dive together. And then once we start shooting, or once we get close to shooting, that's the second AD and the script supervisor's bailiwick. There comes a point in prep, usually about 2 weeks out on a feature, and in television, usually after the second day of prep in television, where the script supervisor and the second AD can work that all out. And if there's a problem, come to me. But as the first, that's something I'm content to deal with, because I broke it down first. I know at that point, page eights are less important to me as a first AD, because it becomes a second AD script supervisor problem. No one's ever going to call the first AD on a set in the middle of shooting and go like, hey, what's with this 2/8 not? And I'm like, I'm trying to make sure someone doesn't die over here. Can we?
Yeah, exactly.
Can we not? And not that it's not important, and it's important to somebody in a cubicle in Burbank somewhere. And it's important to the editors, I guess, but not really.
Not page eight specifically. But...
yeah, they don't really care.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, after the initial go through, and breaking down new sequences, and if there's new scripts on a feature, I give up on page eights 3 weeks out from shooting, and in a television situation, after the second day of prep, I stop looking at that, and it's all the second AD's problem.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
So while we're shooting, then I will ask to always receive draft call sheets, and I will check page 8 story days. I'll just kind of check all that stuff.
You shouldn't have to ask.
And at that point, I will notice if there's a page 8 discrepancy or any discrepancies there, I will email back the second AD about that stuff. But then on the day, if a call sheet comes out and I have a page 8 discrepancy still on the actual call sheet, then I feel like I need to put a note on my top sheet saying that the call sheet is wrong, which I don't really want to do that. But
no, just you could adjust it on your top sheet and put a note and write an email to the second AD saying, hey, I think you were off. Because also, don't forget, sometimes the ADs have reasons for a discrepancy because they're holding back an eighth deeper in the schedule that maybe you didn't see or you don't know about, or it's on a second unit board that you haven't seen. Like there are sometimes reasons for that, and that can also go on a note. You can put call sheet page count incorrect or mistaken. This is all scenes
or different. You can just say it's different from my script breakdown.
Differs from is a good way. But also I've let go of caring about the language on a script supervisor's top sheet. I won't take it personally, and no one should. Like,
I've had ADs take it personally. They say, you don't realize how political this is for me. So I'm very, very careful about the word.
okay, well, maybe I'm just old and cranky and whatever. But it doesn't. I don't feel attacked if someone says my page count was wrong. I have a very full life, and I live in the Caribbean half the year. So a note about my page count being wrong doesn't fill me with dread. So that'll be case to case with whatever ADs you're working with. Is it always? It's almost never going to match up exactly. It never has.
Yeah.
And it never will, because it's a 1930s way of measuring things. It's literally technology from maybe even the 20s of how to measure progress and how to measure your script, that no one's come up with a different way to do it yet. And I don't know that there is. It's as accurate as saying this scene is 8 clams long. Like, honestly, it's an eighth of a page means as much as an eighth of a cookie.
I'm hungry now.
In terms of your progress in a television show, it's an arbitrary measurement, because it's not indicative of the fact that it might be a car chase that lasts 5 minutes. That's only described 3/8 of a page, but it's a minute and a half of screen time. Yeah. Like, it's a made up measuring device that no one should take too personally or too seriously.
Thanks, Simon. I'm going to move on to the next questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks. So Nikhil, who is a director in New Jersey, and he's done some action stuff. He'd like to know how the shot design and sequencing is impacted by the AD, especially for fight scenes. It's a broad question, but some guiding thoughts would be nice.
So Nikhil, I'm guessing you're talking about like a physical fight, like,
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Yeah, that's right. Typically,
once you've been in the space with the director, the DP, and the stunt coordinator, and sometimes the props person, if there are props involved, guns, breaking a vase over someone's head, smashing a table, whatever. Well, first off, in terms of sequencing, in terms of a fight, you want to carve it up geographically first. The first step of building a fight sequence is to carve up the geography, because sometimes fight sequences can last days, right? In television, typically a fight will last half a day or a day. It's rarely less than half a day's worth of work. But I've worked on fight scenes that went on for 3, 4, 5 days. The first thing you do is carve up the geography, and you shoot out areas. You figure out the area you want to be in. You get that area lit or pre-lit, and you watch. Nowadays, stunt coordinators all build previses with their people. It's industry standard now for them to shoot previses on their iPhones, cut it together, put in effects even, which is both good and bad. Because sometimes it's a lot easier to shoot with 2 stuntmen and an iPhone than it is with a film crew and a film camera and lighting and lions and tigers and bears. So sometimes stunt coordinators show things that aren't possible within the scope of the day or the scope of the schedule. But more often than not, they have a good idea about what the schedule is, but sometimes it can cause problems because they're like, yeah, we can do this crazy thing where the camera comes across the thing and then we come in, and it's like, whoa. Like, and then you need to figure out which shots you need to sell the fight and make it work. Every fight has certain things that are in it, that are in every fight scene, which is over one guy to the other to sell the punch, over the other, whatever, and switching stuntmen in for actors. Like, you have actor plus stuntman for one, and then you switch from the same camera, right? So if I start over a stuntman and I'm looking at the actor and the punch crosses my frame that way, then you can switch it and have a stuntman take a punch, like not actually get hit, but get a more spectacular fall to the ground, and figure out in the geographies what the shots are in each geography, and how, the most important one, and the one everyone always seems to forget, how you get from one geography to another geography. Everyone gets very caught up in how many shots we need in each little section of the set. But sometimes you get there and it's like, okay, well, how did we get over by the slide that's on fire? Like, you know, how do we get to that space? So you start with the previs that the stunt coordinator, the best place to start is with the previs. But the previs is built by everyone standing in the space and talking about ideas. Then you look at the previs, and as an assistant director, you get out a piece of paper and a pen and you write down all the shots that are in that previs, and you sit with the director and the stunt coordinator for 15 minutes and go, these are all the shots. I don't know that that's achievable. Is there a shot we can combine and make into make two shots into one shot so that we can be more efficient? Is that safe? Does that work for the stunt coordinator? Does that work for the director? And you will find that you are able to combine many shots within a stunt sequence, because again, safety is job one. There's only so many times you can go through a fight before someone's going to get hurt. If you do take after take after take after take after take, somebody will invariably make a mistake and get hurt. It's like a dance, and it's physical, and people can only, stuntmen can get slammed to the floor more often than actors, but actors and stuntmen are human beings, and they can only do choreography so many times before someone's going to pull a muscle, even as something as small as a pulled muscle. Like, it's just, you need to make sure that once you've got it, you move on. So going through the shots, figuring out how to get from A to B and which characters or stunt people are in each shot in order to build that fight is how you get there. And then as an AD, looking at the shots and saying to the director, I'm like, well, we've got 2 days for this. How do we fit this into 2 days? Or the director saying, I think we need to add half a day to this, because I really want that cool shot where the camera swings from above down into a close-up of Bob on the floor bleeding. So it's through conversation and the previs of the stunt coordinator that you plan that shot. That's sort of the broad framework. But when I started working on bigger movies, as opposed to TV here in Toronto, at the beginning I would get a little wound up, like, how are we going to do it all? How are we? Oh my God. And the real answer to your question, now that I've spoken for 20 minutes, is how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So
that's brilliant. Thank you.
But that's what saves me every time I get a little wound up about, Jesus Christ, this is huge. We want to drive a truck off a cliff and have it explode. And oh my God. It's like, break it down into bite-sized pieces. If the more you break it down and combine and condense shots, look, and if there's a shot that has to stand alone, then it has to stand alone, and you got to fight for that. But the more you condense shots within a fight sequence, the better time you'll have shooting it. And look, you're going to get the scissors in anyway. So if you can extend action and shoot action more complete, and then go back and get your specials, you will get more out of a fight sequence than not. Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
That's great. And you did Man Seeking Woman, so you'll be a great person for his second question. How would an AD approach a shoot where the director and actor have agreed to improvise?
Oh, you mean like with dialogue, not with fighting?
Right? Is that right, Nikhil?
Yeah, blocking mainly, I guess, dialogue too, but that's almost secondary. It's mainly blocking and movement in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, most actors and directors understand that blocking is essential, and if they're going to improvise, then you'll find there's not a lot of improv involved in movement in the scene sometimes, but very rarely. Generally, if you're going to work on something with improv, like what we do in the shadows and Man Seeking Woman had a fair bit of improv, but that was mostly improv out of the mouth. Like what people do in the space usually doesn't change very much with improv. Because also if an actor walks into an unlit area of the stage, the shot's useless anyway. And if they do that, then everybody goes, whoa, 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 whoa. And you cut and you go, are you going to do that? Yeah. Okay. Hey, Scotty, bring in the lights. Let's put some light in there. Scotty's going to be very happy I mentioned him as much as I did. Put in a little more light over there because he's going to go to there. But very rarely, it's very rare to see improv in the movement of people in comedy. Mostly comedic improv is what's coming out of their face. So, and if they improv in the middle of a shot and the camera follows them, then you follow them. And if it's no good, then you try and pick that piece up once you've adjusted for it. You know, a show like What We Do in the Shadows is all shot on the shoulder. What We Do in the Shadows is actually a very good example of what happens when people shoot improv, because they'll do what's in the script once, twice, and then they'll start throwing lines all over the place. And very rarely, I mean, I only did one episode in some second unit, but very, very rarely did somebody go somewhere within a set that wasn't lit. And if they did, then they were like, "That's brilliant. We'll do it again, but hold on, we gotta bash some light in there so we can see what you're doing."
Nikhil, are you directing something with improv now?
Well, yeah, I'm taking a UCB class and writing a pilot, and the spec script I'm writing is for What We Do in Shadows, which I will then transform into like an original thing, and I want to shoot that. So that's where that question was coming from. I guess, you know, I'm wondering if the conversation could lead to asking the DP to, I guess, light the set in a certain way or do something that facilitates blocking. And I'm trying to figure out who drives that bit of the conversation. Could an AD sort of step in and sort of make those kinds of points, or is that outside of the ADs?
Typically, as the assistant director, I wouldn't have to. If I see that something's heading a certain way and maybe the DP or the gaffer didn't account for something that happened in the blocking or might happen, I would first go to the director and say, "Hey, do you want him to go over to the buffalo head in the corner? Because we talked about it, but we didn't see it in the blocking. Is that an area where we play?" And then the director talks to the DP about that. My job is to facilitate that conversation. But the director and the DP are the ones who ultimately decide where the shot goes. I'm okay to facilitate. Like I said, my job is to direct the flow of water in the river, right? But at the beginning, when you block something, as the director, you can turn to the DP and say, "You know what? He may want to walk over there. So if it's not going to cost me," because also as the director, you need to think about time, my friend. Yeah. So time is always working against you. So, you know, you can ask the DP, "Hey, if it's not going to cost us a half an hour of lighting, can we make sure that he can go over as far as X?" And I've worked on, you know, stuff that had some improv in it where people went, "Okay, he'll be somewhere in between here and here, and he'll stop here." And now first ACs, which is the other part of the equation, is making sure it's in focus. First ACs now all work off monitors away from the set. They're not guessing anymore. And so much to their chagrin, they can follow the puck and you know, say, "Hey, you can also say to your actors, if you're gonna not be where we said, or if you want to travel somewhere where we never talked about, just make sure you go there, stand for a beat before you deliver the funny so that the ACs can keep up," right? And it's not a full second, it's like a quarter second. But the difference between with the background up, I don't know. The difference between, "Oh my God, I'm coming into the room," and "Oh my God, I'm coming into the room," that beat can give a first AC enough time to get it in focus so he can get the spontaneity of it as opposed to missing it altogether.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I just want to say thank you. That was really brilliant. And I don't know if you're ever going to write a book, but if you do, you should title it "How Do I Eat an Elephant?" I think that's just thank you.
You know, that's something an assistant director told me a long time ago. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
That's great. From Jing, out of curiosity, how have you found the process of working with non-American, non-Canadian crew within your AD local heads of department? You did mention you did a production in Hungary. Yeah, Darrin's worked a lot of countries, I think, right? So anything from that or other productions would do.
Yeah, every place is different, but there are things that are universal. What assistant director's job responsibilities are differs a little bit from place to place. But most of it is pretty consistent. The one thing I will say is that being an English speaker who speaks Spanish conversationally, when I work in another country that is not an English speaking country, I can, excuse me, it's probably COVID. When I work in another country that is not an English speaking country, in Spanish, I can get by because I speak Spanish and I can be understood in Spanish. But even then, the most important thing is, like, you've heard how fast I talk here, especially how I talk on the radio. And the most important thing is making sure your non-English speaking crew, even if they do speak English, it's not their first language. So they have to think, they need time to turn that around. So it's about how you communicate with non-English speaking crew in non-English speaking countries. You know, for instance, in Hungary, I work in the Dominican Republic and Colombia a little bit. And, you know, I can translate on the fly, even though my Spanish is not perfect, people want to understand what I mean. In Hungary and in Prague, for instance, and in Malta, I always said, listen, you know, myself and the first AD I was working for at the time, JJ, we talk really fast on the radio. And I've had even a crew in England say to me, I don't quite understand you when you're speaking very fast and you're Canadian on the radio. And I'm like, okay, but the one thing I've always said is, please, 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 if you did not understand direction I've given you or what I've asked you to do because I've spoken too fast, or, you know, I'm using words that you're not familiar with, I will not think you are stupid. I will not be upset. Please, please, please tell me to repeat myself, as opposed to you going, yeah, and walking away and not doing what I've asked properly, or not doing what I've asked at all. Because it's important that they understand. That's the most important thing, is when working in other countries, is to ensure, because you're a guest there. So you can't roll into another country and be like, here's how we do it in Hollywood. Like, and there are some things that do need to run the way we do it in Hollywood and how we do it in Toronto. There are certain standards of safety and speed that, you know, is expected, and things don't always run at the same tempo. But if you're working in someone else's country, it's on you to make sure that you are understood. They will get you translators. They will get you people who speak English in your department. But if you won't adapt somewhat to either the language barrier or the English as a first language barrier, then it's on you for why your team messed up. Yeah, and sometimes I will say this, language aside, in other places that are not film centers, like Hungary's a strong film center. Like, they've been making major Hollywood movies there for 40, 45 years. Their crews, and Scotty will hate me for this, their crews are as good as anywhere on earth. They have crews that are as good as the crews in Los Angeles or Toronto or Vancouver or New York. They don't have as many, but they have crews that are A crews. Same with Mexico. Mexico City has A camera teams, and an A crew is an A crew is an A crew in a town. The problem is so much is getting produced now that nobody's got a complete all-star crew anymore. You know, when I would do features away from home in, you know, 2020, which is now 20 years ago. In my head, 20 years ago is 1980, but it's really 2020. You know, shows in other countries, you brought an all-star team, and you had the all-star team from that country working with you because there weren't a million things getting done. Now there's a million shows getting produced, and there is no such thing as a complete A crew from top to bottom. It just doesn't exist. So you have to be a little patient, and you have to think about things that you wouldn't normally think about, especially locations. Locations departments in other countries have a different standard of service. Locations are unit. In terms of you know, as an AD, I had to ask questions, or JJ authors, I saw him asking questions in meetings, and this taught me a lot for my future as a first AD, because most of my first AD jobs are in non-English speaking countries that don't necessarily have a huge infrastructure. Is you need to think about asking questions that you would never ask in Toronto, New York, or Los Angeles, not because they're bad at their jobs. They just do things a different way. They don't need as many things as we expect. So knowing what I know about other departments, and I would never tell someone how to do their job. I would ask them how they plan to do their job, and think about that. And like I've seen a location manager in Malta go like, "We need change rooms," and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, there's 80 extras in that scene." And he's like, "I didn't know," and I'm like, "It's on the one-liner. Like, how could you not know we were having extras that day?" But it's about, in places that aren't North American or British film centers with infrastructure, you need to be prepared to ask questions and think about things as if you were a department head from another department. Like, if I was the location manager of this movie, what would I want? And then ask them if they have it. And the way you ask is as important as asking.
Thank you very much. That was very much an insightful, and just want to see what is out there besides just the North American bubble we all live in. But thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are differences in what crews do. Like, you know, in Europe, a lot of the time, the electrics do the flagging as well as move the fixtures around. And some people love it and some people hate it. I don't particularly like it because I don't think it gets done as efficiently. But, you know, there are regional differences about who does what, carrying chairs, locations, crap, that sort of thing. That's easy to figure out and find out what people do. Like in the Dominican, I live and work, and that's my front yard. I live and work in the Dominican Republic as well, and there the assistant directors make the sides at night. Like, the office doesn't make the sides. So, and there's always a big argument about it on every show, and every show I lose because the office pretends not to know how to do it. So, you know, it's just little stuff like that you can let go of. But in terms of process and how things get where they go, like I said, how you ask is as important as what you ask for.
Okay. And the last question, did you have any danger situation in a location where you guys had to shut down, like firearms, robbery, or natural disasters?
I've never had to shut down for firearms or robbery. I had to lock down as a second on Bad Boys, I did have to lock down my base camp because there was gunfire across the street in Atlanta. So the brave second assistant director went door to door in base camp and told everyone to stay inside and not come out of their trailers until the police give us the all clear, at which point every actor stuck their head out the door and wanted to see what was going on. At which point I yelled at them and said, get back in your holes, meat puppets. I didn't say that. But yes, I once had to lock down a base camp. We didn't shut down. I have had to shut down for a natural disaster once in Malta. Malta is this little tiny rock in the middle of the Mediterranean that is the gateway to Africa and the gateway to Europe. And it's strategically very important in every war since the dawn of time, because you can't invade one continent or the other without stopping in Malta. So the problem with that is that as a coddled North American filmmaker, you can generally see weather coming 2 days in advance, right? You look at the radar. I'm as good as like Action Weather 7 on something. And you look at the weather radar in North America, and you can see weather coming in patterns, and you kind of know what you're going to get 2 days out. In Malta, it would be crystal clear with stars in the skies, and then out of the blue, with no warning, and it didn't come from anywhere, there would be biblical end of days thunderstorms with lightning, fingers of lightning shooting down all around you out of nowhere that you couldn't see coming. I think I got a 15-minute warning once. Was the furthest out warning I ever got on one of those storms. And if Bucky was here, there was another assistant director named Bucky supposed to be here with me at some point. If Bucky was here, he was there with me. and it was the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. Both Bucky and I are Hebrews, and we're Jew-ish. And it was Yom Kippur, and we did eat bacon on Yom Kippur because we like bacon. And that night, we were shooting in a quarry, and my job as the second AD, in addition to making phone calls and figuring out the next day and making a plan and talking to every department and looking at Daniela and telling her that'll never work, is every 15 minutes or so or 20 minutes or so, I look at the weather. It's just a habit I've developed as a second AD over time, is every 20 minutes or half hour, I look at my phone and look at the weather. And nothing, clear, great, fine. All night long, we were on our last shot of the night, and out of the blue, there was a giant red dot 15 minutes from where we were. And I got on the radio immediately. I'm like, guys, you have 15 minutes. Everyone needs to make safe. There's lightning and thunder and rain. And the problem with shooting in a quarry with all that is, A, you're totally exposed. There's no cover. And B, the bowl of the quarry will fill with water. And you will be standing in water while the lightning comes down and fires all around you. So we did get 15 minutes warning. So we started to make stuff safe, but they were continuing to shoot until there was lightning within a 6-mile radius, because that's the rule. And we were shooting. Then all of a sudden the lightning came out of nowhere, and we were already up to our ass in water. We started like moving people to the safe area at the top of the quarry where there was a structure for people to be in. I mean, it wasn't a lunch tent. It was like a lunch hut made out of recycled bottles. And like, it was it wasn't unsafe, but it wasn't the most secure place to be during a major thunderstorm. Lightning wise, it was fine. But from a lightning perspective, we were covered because it did have a real roof on it, but it was like corrugated plastic shelter. And we got everything out, but the trucks got stuck. The director got electrocuted. We think from 220 power, not from lightning. He claims it was lightning that traveled through. He was touching the monitor, and I'm like, if it had been lightning, you wouldn't have been fine to work the next day. So, but we did lose a day. We lost a day of shooting. We had to figure out how to get the trucks out, and we had to rebuild the set because the set got blown to smithereens because of the weather, and it came out of nowhere and left just as fast. And I have awesome pictures of myself, the first AD, the transport coordinator, and the producer, Frank Siracusa, all huddling in a corner of this Quonset hut, figuring out like, all right, what do we do? What do we do? How do we figure this out? And but that's sort of an allegory for filmmaking, is like, bring all the smartest people you know together, and somebody or a bunch of people will figure a way out of this mess. And so that's what you got to do in crisis situations like that. The only other natural disaster washout I ever had is the show I did the movie Old that came out last year, the M. Night Shyamalan movie Old in the Dominican Republic. And I was supposed to start on a date, and we got hit with a hurricane. And they had built a giant rock wall on the beach. And a day after the hurricane, the producer called me and said, yeah, you're not going to start on Monday. We're pushing. We've had some damage to the set. I was like, oh, okay. I'm happy to go to the beach every day. And so I walk that beach every day. And 2 days after the hurricane, knowing that I had another month before the movie was starting, we got washed out for a month because I had to literally rebuild the set. I'm walking down the beach in the Dominican Republic, and I see big giant chunks of yellow foam on my beach, and the beach you see behind me there in the Dominican Republic. And I'm like, it looked, that could be any type of flotation foam, marine foam from like life jackets or a boat, whatever. I'm seeing a lot of it. And then I saw one the size of like a Buick, and I was like, well, that's weird. And I kicked it over, and it was painted gray on the other side. And I was like, that's a movie rock. I've done this my whole life. I know what a movie rock looks like. That's a piece of the set. And I live a 3-hour drive from where that set is. So the set that had been destroyed in the hurricane, parts of it had made its way 3 hours down the coast, because I live on the same coast as that beach. Made its way 3 hours down the coast and landed on my beach. So I took a picture of it, sent it to the producer, and said, "Are you missing something?" And he said, "Yes, please bring that back. We need it to help rebuild."
And in when I shot in India, we had political riots and a stabbing on set. So anything can happen. Shit happens, right?
Yeah.
And we just solve our way out of the problems and get the movies made. Thank you so much, Darrin. That was incredible. We'll edit this down to a manageable length, but it's 100%
It's
excellent.
all gold, Daniela. Don't touch a thing.
Okay.
This is better than Scotty's.
It's potentially better.
Did you just say it's potentially better than Scotty's? I heard that come out of your mouth. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for your patience and attending, and see you all next week. See you in cyberspace, Darrin.
Thank you.